Well, the Iowa men and the Iowa women advance to the weekend, the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, and both will have a chance at the Sweet 16 next week. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to say that? Good news is Iowa women celebrating good times themselves. There are good things happening in Hawkeye Nation, folks. The Iowa women defeating Illinois State by a final of 98-58. That's how you beat what we would call an overmatched team, folks. That is a team that was shouldn't probably have been on the same floor as Iowa, despite being, you could call Illinois State as somewhat of a power at the Missouri Valley level. Iowa did exactly what it's supposed to do against an inferior opponent. And yes, I get that women's basketball isn't as balanced typically as men's hoops is, but that's exactly what you're supposed to do against a team who is inferior to you. I'm happy for the women, and it makes me reflect back to the men and think, boy, just opportunity missed. But we're here to talk positive things. Again, Iowa over Illinois State, 98-58. We're taking your calls here, taking your chats on this Friday afternoon. If you have not already done so, please share this show on social media. Help the show to grow, as always. And our call line is open, 515-635-1601, 515-635-1601. And yes, I know I got some feedback from last night. Yes, I know we had a caller, one of our regular callers call in, and he was on the phone for a long time. I'm not going to let that happen today. It was a late night last night. We were mourning the Iowa men's basketball loss. I promise that won't happen today, okay? So feel free to call us, 515-635-1601. The Iowa women, of course, will face Creighton on Sunday at a time to be announced, to be determined, whatever you want to call it there. I believe those times should be set by the morning, perhaps even late tonight. Not sure how the women's TV schedules are released during tournament play. I know the men, we knew those. We knew the Saturday schedule earlier this morning. Perhaps they were even released last night. But the bottom line is, again, Iowa did what it needed to do. James says good win, looks sloppy early, but got the job done. And that's all you can ask for. I mean, that's all you can ask for against a team that in Illinois State that was familiar. I mean, you saw the common players, the all Iowa attack and Caitlin Clark and, of course, Ashley Jones from Iowa State and a couple of girls from Illinois State. So there was some familiarity between these two programs. They're pretty close in proximity to one another, but Illinois State was never really in this game. I mean, the first 5 minutes of the game, Illinois State got off to, I think, like a 7-2 start, but you just knew Iowa was going to figure things out. Just way too much offense from Caitlin Clark, Gabby Marshall, and Monica Sonano. And boy, if Monica Sonano is this efficient once we get to the Sweet 16, I think this team can beat just about anybody. Now, again, Illinois State is not long. They're not athletic in comparison to many of the opponents that Iowa has down the road. Even in Iowa State, a lot more athletic than Illinois State. And that's stating the obvious. I understand that. But Caitlin Clark with 27 points, 10 assists, 6 rebounds, 4 turnovers. That's an efficient day. I mean, if you're going to get 27, 10, and 6 with just 4 turns, that is absolutely player of the year stuff right there. And I've said that before, but that's one of the better stat lines for Caitlin this year because of the low turnover count. And that's been the one bugaboo. And that makes sense. If you watch some of the best point guards to ever play in the men's or women's game, if they're high volume guards, they're going to turn the ball over. I mean, Russell Westbrook's a perfect example of that. I'm not a big Russell Westbrook fan, but he's always had pretty high turnover counts. James Harden's even had fairly high turnover counts at times. You're not going to get those high turnover counts if you're not making big plays, typically. And if you're going to do that, you're probably not going to be seeing the floor much. Caitlin Clark, just a high volume player, but right now, 4 turnovers on the day. That's a tremendous stat line for Caitlin. Gabby Marshall chipped in 13 points, 5 assists, 3 steals. The Iowa women are stat stuffers. They, whether it be obviously Sonano and Clark, those are your 2 girls that are going to be your keys. The health of those 2 players, obviously Clark is of primary importance there as it relates to health, but those are your 2 big guns. they both need to stay healthy for Iowa to advance past the Sweet 16. I think this team will beat Creighton on Sunday, although Creighton with a good win today against Colorado, but they need Clark and they need Sonano to stay healthy in order for Iowa to be able to advance much past that. And I mentioned Sonano, 18 points, 7 rebounds. Just a really good day. And as it relates to the team turnover numbers, when Caitlin Clark's turnover numbers are low, the team's turnover numbers are low. And they still had 11 turnovers, but that's a winning number. They did win that category, 13-11. 60% from the field for the Hawks, just 30% for the Redbirds, 46% from three, as opposed to 17% from Illinois State and 20 of 21 from the free throw line for 95%. Out-rebounded the Redbirds just by 1, but they won by 40 despite that close category. So domination is what you want at this point in the tournament, especially in the women's game, and that's exactly what we got out of the Iowa women today. Let's take our first caller. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Hey, Corey, it's the real MVP.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
I'm doing better than yesterday.
Good. Me too. Somewhat.
Yeah, I know. It still hurts a bit, but I'm going to get over it.
As we all will.
But Illinois State's just a team that's happy to be there. I mean, Juju's really carried them all year to this point, but they didn't have any of the talent just to compete with Iowa. And it was clear based on the result today that was the case. Yeah,
and Juju ended up with 25. I mean, we know what she was going to bring. I thought she had a good day, 25 and 25, 3 and 3, but 10 of 21 from the field. That's a pretty efficient day, and it's hard. I mean, an opponent like that, I get it's regionally, it's not a difficult travel, and it's not real difficult for Colorado or Creighton either. But that's a full packed house, and I don't know what percentage of these NCAA tournament early round games and these arenas are going to be sold out, but for Iowa to be packed to the rafters on a Friday at 2, I mean, that's pretty impressive, is it not? You're a Kentucky fan.
Yeah, it's always impressive. I mean, to have turnout like that, most teams don't get turnout like that. Like, I was watching the Virginia Tech Florida Gulf Coast tank today, and I would say there was more Iowa fans.
Yeah,
at their game, and I mean,
at the Florida Gulf Coast.
Yeah. Florida Gulf Coast versus Virginia Tech. They played today in the 12-5 matchup. Earlier, Kittley had 42 points.
Why was there more Iowa fans there?
No, I meant there's more Iowa fans at their game
than
there was. Sorry.
I got you. I'm like, why was there more Iowa fans at the Florida Gulf Coast game?
No, sorry. Words are hard.
I got you. Words are hard.
But I think Iowa has got a pretty easy path to the Sweet 16. I mean, Creighton's, when they've played great teams like UConn and South Dakota, they weren't able to win. They were able to keep it somewhat close in the first half, but then there'd be a separation in the second half. And I'm looking for similar results when they play Iowa next.
Yeah, I think Iowa's going to handle Creighton. I think we're destined for an Iowa State-Iowa rematch, which is great for the state. I think it's ridiculous that the game has to be played in Greensboro, but that's just the nature of the tournament. But I think it'll be a great matchup. Boy, the nation will be watching, and the state of Iowa will be peeled to the television screens. Let's just hope that I'm hoping that Iowa State wins. I don't want Iowa State to get upset tonight. They play the late game. They play at 9 p.m. Central Time tonight on ESPNU.
I doubt they're going to lose to UT Arlington. Just historic information alone says it's highly unlikely.
I agree.
And let me ask you about the Florida Gulf Coast game. Did you see any of it, or do you know the outcome of the game?
I do know that Florida Gulf Coast won. You know that I predicted that win, so not to brag on myself there, but I did have Florida Gulf Coast winning that game. I did not watch it. I saw highlights of it. I saw highlights of the South Carolina Howard game, which, just put me back into reality for a second. But no, what did you want to ask about the Florida Gulf Coast game?
I think Florida Gulf Coast got screwed over by their seeding. There's no way, based on their record and how good the teams they've been. They should have been a 12 seed, and I feel bad for Virginia Tech because they're a good basketball program that just faced a really good team.
Yeah, I don't think
Florida Gulf Coast, they could beat Maryland next.
I don't think Florida Gulf Coast was done dirty. I think Virginia Tech was done dirty because now Florida Gulf Coast has a somewhat open draw. Yeah, they get Maryland, but and Maryland is playing right now, so I guess we don't know that for sure. But they're up 17. But yeah, you're right. 30 and 2. I mean, that's incredible that they were seeded as low as a 12.
Right, and that's what I meant is if you're Florida Gulf Coast, I would expect that type of record in the team. I mean, they beat LSU at LSU. That's really hard to do this year.
That's a good team.
Yep.
It's just a good team.
Yeah,
They didn't have a real tough non-conference, but they beat Temple, they beat Florida, they beat LSU. Yeah, they did what they needed to do. I mean, they had a bad loss to Princeton, although Princeton's not bad.
Yeah, but you know what, in my opinion, Florida Gulf Coast should have been a 7th seed like Murray State was in the men's. I think those two are very similar teams in terms of they're in a lower conference, but they're a really good basketball team overall.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so congratulations on the win, Corey.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I know it eases some of the pain from yesterday's loss to the Spiders.
A little bit, and I made sure to say Princeton isn't bad because y'all play them tonight. So, not tonight. You play them. When do you play them?
Tomorrow at 4.
Okay, 4 Eastern. Yeah. Yep. So Princeton Princeton. Who did they upset? Who did Princeton? Or not? Who did they upset? Who did they? They were conference champ. Let's see. I'm just looking at their resume. Yeah, they're 24-4. That's a good team. You could argue the same about Princeton because they got a win over Florida Gulf Coast. I have not looked at their resume in depth, but beat Villanova. Didn't Villanova beat Connecticut?
Yes, at Connecticut.
Yeah, Princeton won at Villanova. Let's see. Won against Florida Gulf Coast. Lost to Seton Hall. Lost to Texas. Had a game against UCF canceled.
A lot of teams lost to Texas this year.
That's a dangerous game, though, for you tomorrow, buddy. That's a dangerous game.
I would be more worried about I think we could lose it, but just the way we've been playing in the last week, I mean, we're the hottest team in the country by far. So, and it's about how you're playing right now. It's not about how good you've been all season.
Right.
So I think it'll be closer than expected, but I think we'll win by double digits in the end. Well, Corey, that's all I got for you tonight. Good luck for your next game against Creighton, and go Peacocks.
That's right. Appreciate it, sir. Appreciate the call. And, yeah, go Cox, go Peacocks, go whatever, go Spiders. Skylar, a little bit better day for the Hawkeye State. It's accurate. James says, good win, looks sloppy at the start, did what we should have done. Drill MVP, Illinois State was just happy to be there. Haven't made the tournament since 2008. Cooper, thank you for being here, sir. Always good to see your name on the live stream. James says we go from one team with an Iowa connection to a team with more Iowa connections. That's pretty cool. And then we're going to go to a team with even more Iowa connections after that. I mean, we're literally talking about Iowa's biggest rival in Iowa State. Lemansky, Hawkeye women first season, 1974, 5 wins, 16 losses. 22,157 record attendance, February 1985 versus Ohio State. A little bit broken up here. I'm trying to put your message together here, Lemansky. But what a season it has been. What a run for Lisa Bluter. Again, can she get over the hump? I mean, she's got a different hump to get over that Fran McCaffrey does not have. Fran McCaffrey has the hump of getting to the Sweet 16. Lisa Bluter, I think, right now, I mean, can she get to the Final Four? Or is this team good enough to get to the Final Four? I think that's going to be tough given who's in their section. I know we went through the draw last night. I just think it's going to be tough. And if let's go ahead and do that here since we're talking about the draw and we can actually talk about an Iowa women's victory. I know we took a lot of time doing this last night, so I'm not going to bore you with this. But let's go ahead and take a look at my my bracket here. And again, these are my projections. This is not what has happened, but we can kind of review and get this banner out of your way. Maybe. Where's the banner? There we go. Nope, that's not it either. Let's try it again. There we go. Thank you very much. Okay. So just to kind of review what's happened for any Iowa fans who are just now seeing, I know a lot of people getting off work here at about 5:00 local time to kind of review what has happened so far today. So South Carolina blew out Howard 79-21. I feel terrible for Howard. They were 21-10 heading in. They win they lose 21-79. So this, of course, this result right here is obvious. We knew that going in. I think I hate to think what the odds were, what the line was in that game, but South Carolina covered. Let's just say that. Now, Miami did beat South Florida. That was one I had wrong. So the 8-seeded Hurricanes move on. No, let's get that off there. Right now we've got, let's see, let me move down the list. The North Carolina game. Let me get you a score on that. North Carolina has not played yet. So some of these games, of course, will be played tomorrow. Iowa State will play tonight. I've got them beating Texas Arlington. They'll play in Hilton tonight. Utah leading. Let's see. Utah's not in this section either. What section are we looking at here? Greensboro. Man, my mind is working slow today, folks. Mentioned Miami. Creighton over Colorado. You see, that was a prediction I got right. They will play the Hawkeyes tomorrow. Dayton and Georgia are still to play this evening, and and then of course there'll be other games played tomorrow. But this is a pretty decent draw for Iowa now with Creighton, the 10 seed, moving on. And I didn't watch the majority of that Creighton Colorado game, but I like Iowa's chances to get through there. Assuming Georgia wins, I think this could be a dicey matchup for Iowa State. But I see the Cyclones getting. I think the Sweet 16 is pretty clear. I just don't know who's gonna trip up South Carolina before the Elite Eight. I don't know who that's going to be. Even if Iowa can get past Iowa State to get to the Elite Eight, I just don't know who. Could Arizona? I don't know that Arizona has the firepower. I've got North Carolina moving on. I really don't think they can beat South Carolina either. But that is my bracket as it currently stands. So, but again, good win for Iowa. One game at a time. And boy, winning by 40 at home in a tournament game is about what you asked for. Exactly what the doctor ordered on that first round victory. Ari Gold, switching for a moment to the men's game. Is there any truth to the rumor that Fran was looking to leave Iowa in the last year? I don't. I listen. I'm never going to sit, try to fool anybody on here on information that I simply don't have. But I seriously doubt. I would say there's about a 1% chance that there was any rumor to this. I don't believe Fran was looking to go anywhere. I do believe that Fran is happy here. I think having his kids in school, having his kids part of the team, having Jack McCaffrey at Iowa City, I have a hard time seeing him trying to leave. Is it possible? I suppose. Could he want to be closer to family or back to his roots out east? I've always said that my guess is that the one job he would leave Iowa for, the realistic opening that could happen, would be if Mike Bray ends up leaving Notre Dame and that job becomes open and they're interested. I think that might be the one job he would consider taking if they would take him. The rumors from whatever stupid social media crap account, I hate to call it that, but it was completely, don't trust just random social media accounts that claim to know the ins and outs about college basketball and hirings and whatnot. That has largely been, a lot of those claims have been debunked. It's just my understanding is it's a conglomerate of people who knows who actually has access to those Twitter accounts that are creating these rumors. I don't believe there's any truth behind this, Ari Gold, and I'll be shocked if he's not the Iowa coach next year. Connie, when the Iowa women are making the threes, I was really emotional because the men couldn't get them yesterday. That's accurate. I know people were talking yesterday about the Wilson ball that Iowa played with, and I get that's a factor. And I'm not saying that the men were making excuses, but that is an excuse. But the Iowa women, I'm assuming the ball today that they played with was the ball they're used to playing with, would be my guess. So absolutely, you're going to see this team raining threes. There's a lot of weapons from three on this team, not to mention Caitlin Clark, who can do it all. But you've got Gabby Marshall. We've seen Tommy Taiwo really come on strong. Certainly McKenna Warnock being healthy now helps. Kate Martin can knock them down, although I thought she struggled at times today. But this is a team that's going to be able to hit threes. And, they got a lot of firepower. Again, my only concern moving forward is athleticism and length to defend people like Caitlin Clark and Monica Sanano. So you neutralize those two, which I understand that's hard to do. But if you're able to pull that off, it's going to be hard for Iowa to beat teams because the offense flows through those two huge pieces offensively. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Lomansky, Corey.
Hey, Lomansky.
Before earlier today, I caught your podcast with the real MVP from last night. It was like a wake. People that know each other, two people that know each other at a wake, and that was kind of painful because I think a lot of Iowa fans feel like you feel. But I thought it was courageous of you to come back on and hash over it again. I'm going into and I want to just touch on very Hayden Fry-like action by you when you had Gatens on and Coach on, and the person called Richmond trash, and it's your show, number one. Number two, somebody knocked on your front door of your home and you open the door and they trashed your next door neighbor. I think you'd shut the damn door. So I thought that was excellent management of your show. I'm going to tie the women's and the men's program together about culture.
Okay.
And I type in the stuff about Lisa Bluter. And if you really look at the men's Iowa basketball coaches, we've had 4 Hall of Fame coaches in our history. One is before our time in the 1920s. Then you have Ralph Miller, who goes before my time also. Then you have George Raveling for 3 years here, that, of course, was responsible for the recruiting that Tom Davis took and had a hell of a run. Then you have Lute Olson, who was here 9 years. And then we have kind of got sidetracked with 2 coaches, in my opinion. People can debate Alford, but Alford and Licklider didn't give us, in my opinion, much momentum. I think if you look where Alford's gone since, I think he's now at Nevada. He's made several stops after Iowa. I don't give him, I don't even know if he'd be the top. He wouldn't be very near the top of Iowa coaching history, in my opinion. I think they hired a name and got rid of Tom Davis, one of the major mistakes any athletic director's ever made. And then if you look at Fran, if you take away his first 4 years, and the reason I say that is, he's got to get the style of player for his program. But I think it was in his 3rd year, he had a 20-win season. Now, if you take his last 8 and you divide by the wins, that's 20.3 wins. And I guess some points have been made about, how far as a coach has he taken. But think about the momentum the last few years with Garza and Keegan. And, I watched Caitlin Clark come off the court after interview, and she goes towards the tunnel and stops and signs all these autographs from these young girls. And it's true that recruiting is, national really helps. The Chicago connection with Lute Olson through an assistant got Kenny Arnold and Ronnie Lester. The North Carolina transfer, Steve Krafsis, that team went to the Final Four. He came from North Carolina. Think of what, and I guess I'll give a little love to Connor McCaffrey and Jordan Bohannon. If you watch Jordan Bohannon's post presser after our tough loss, the guy was just shook, and McCaffrey is, putting his hand on his head and put his hand on his back of his neck. And think of like what Caitlin Clark is doing for recruiting, and Jordan Bohannon, Connor McCaffrey, those young people that someday will choose a college. And I go back to the days where Roy Williams, I almost have I respect him, but I just hate him because he stole Ray LaFrenz and Heinrich. He stole so many Iowa players to Kansas, and while we mourn our loss in the tournament, I think if we take 5 steps back and look at the tenure and everything, we can feel a lot better about it. I'll listen to your comments.
I agree, Lemansky. Now, I'll say this for the fans, because there are fans out there that they're very angry with Fran right now. You know that, right?
Well, I think anger is putting it lightly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I mean, everybody has a right to feel how they want to feel. But what I will say on that, I'm a Fran McCaffery fan. And yes, the caller that called yesterday, I explained that last night. The reason I cut that call short was because I wanted to show respect to Matt Gatens, who was on the show with us. That's all there is to that. And, he calls in today. I have no problem chatting with him. I, again, appreciate him listening. Appreciate everybody listening. But as it relates to Fran McCaffery, he still has to figure out March Madness. There's no question about that, because we're kind of in the same, right now, can we, and I know some fans, I have to look at numbers, but Fran has basically restored Iowa to what Iowa was under Tom Davis for the most part. Am I correct in saying that? Other than taking a year or two where Tom Davis had success early in his tenure in the tournament, for the most part, this is why Tom Davis was relieved, because he wasn't winning enough. Can we agree with that?
Yeah, I think if you lop off the players that George Raveling recruited, just that's the first 3 years of Tom Davis, I think your comment is fairly accurate.
Right. And that's what people will fall back on when defending the move. I think the move was ridiculous as well. I'm agree, and I was taught back then, basically. But my point is, he's still got to get over that hump, and I feel bad for Fran, because you and I both know, Lemansky, that he had not had any success in the Big Ten tournament. The Big Ten tournament had been such a bugaboo for Fran McCaffery, and that was one of the more frustrating things to me. It was even more frustrating maybe than the NCAA tournament, because at least in the NCAA tournament, he consistently won at least a game, and Iowa typically just ran into a power in the second round. Now, that didn't happen this year, but my point being, this team found a way to win in the NCAA, or in the Big Ten tournament, and that is a huge, huge step forward. No, they didn't win just one game. They didn't win just 2 games. They didn't win just 3 games. They won 4 games in 4 days and won the title. I am frustrated, just like everybody else, because I thought this team was built to make a deep run, and to not even get past the first day is frustrating. And Lemansky, I know you're frustrated by it. I'm sure you were frustrated yesterday, but you're right. We got to keep things in perspective. And Fran's not on the hot seat, nor should he be after winning the Big Ten. You bounce back. I do think if there's any chance that Keegan Murray comes back, I think those chances were elevated because of the loss yesterday. I don't know if that moves the needle from 0.5% to 1%, but it might move it slightly. So I am a Fran fan right now. There's no question about it. It is frustrating, and it's frustrating with how Iowa lost, because they got completely outplayed, and it was shocking to me. But I'm with you. Fran deserves the support of the fan base, in my opinion. With that being said, everybody has a right to their own opinions, and if they want to, complain about March, they're right. Fran has not gotten to the second weekend in March, his entire tenure, and it's been 12 years now.
So I'm going to jump to comparing history of coaches. And Tom Davis coached out east at Boston College. He was at Stanford out west. He's a Ridgeway, Wisconsin born and bred guy, came to coach Iowa. And so he had almost 3 different conferences to hone his craft. Fran basically left the head coaching job in Lehigh after UC Greensboro, left the Lehigh coaching job to study under Jack McLeod, who coached in the NBA, and under Digger Phelps at Notre Dame, to hone his craft. And I think even though he's 62, I think when you go for the conferences where Fran was ahead of the program, and now he shows up at the Big Ten, some people would argue he's had enough time to hone his craft. But I listened to the Big Ten Network, and they said there was a commentator said one really interesting thing, and you and I talked about it a couple shows ago, and it was regarding, how much does Keegan Murray touch the ball? And the Big Ten commentator said, Fran's motion offense, which he's been using for a long time, maybe Fran will reevaluate down the stretch with his team more plays to his star, because in his opinion, he ran the motion offense and the ball can end up in the hands of the wrong guy. And the second thing I'd like your comment on, I'm trying to figure out if this was because of Connor and because of our experience of our seniors, Bohannon and Connor. Were we an experienced team or weren't we? And when the bright lights come on and you haven't been there before, I can't figure out if we were slightly tired, which I just don't think so.
I think they were.
The lights are pretty bright and the expectations are so high. I think, we look like a young team. I'll let you comment.
I think they were gassed, and I don't say that. And I say that primarily because it looked like Iowa was a step slow. I just haven't seen Iowa move that slow all year. Specifically on offense, it just seemed like everything was just in slow motion. But it's not an excuse. It's not a valid excuse because Richmond had the same amount of prep. They had played 4 games in 4 days, won a title. If Iowa was having an emotional hangover, then that's an Iowa problem. If they were having problems with the ball, then that's an Iowa problem. So to me, I think fatigue, you could argue it does something to do with it. I think it's unfair that Iowa had to play Thursday instead of Friday. And it's ridiculous that the Big Ten and still insists on playing the championship game on Sunday. I just think that's ridiculous. Let's move it to Saturday. And if at all possible, if you play in your championship game over the weekend, then don't make these teams play until Friday. I think that's only fair. But again, it's not an excuse. I'm not going to use it as an excuse, but it is, I think, a factor. I do believe it played a factor in the result. That's what I would say, because I just have not seen that team look sluggish like that all year. Even in the Rutgers game where Iowa couldn't get a shot to fall, like they didn't look sluggish in that game. Rutgers just didn't allow anything from anywhere on the court. Defensively, Rutgers played a lot better than Richmond did yesterday. Rutgers wasn't allowing anything inside, wasn't allowing anything outside. I thought Iowa had a lot of open looks in the first half. They just missed. And I just never felt good about the game yesterday. Watching it, I just never felt like Iowa was in a position to take control. Patrick McCaffrey had the quick 7 in the second half. It felt like, okay, we can get a couple buckets here and move ahead. But boy, within a couple minutes, Richmond was right back in front. Richmond basically controlled that game from tip to final horn. And I said it last night on the show, Lomansky, late night. I said, and yes, you can say I'm a homer. I think if Iowa played that Richmond team on a neutral court 10 times, I believe Iowa would win 9. I really believe that. I think they'd win 9 of 10 times. I don't care what the naysayers have to say. I really believe that to be the case, and it'll never be proven. But Iowa's a much better team, and I think you play tomorrow, they'd win. They may win by 10 or 15. But that's what's crazy about March. That's the flaw with March. That's what's great about March. And it just stinks to be on the other end of it, especially after what happened this past weekend.
I'm going to debate you a little bit.
Okay.
And I want your response. To me, it's interesting that Patrick McCaffrey looked like he had fresh legs. And, of course, he hasn't played as many minutes because he's been out. And so his minutes leading up to this were kind of insulated. And he looked like the one guy that had little steps. So what I can't figure out is we're supposed to have the biggest bench in the Big Ten that's kind of linked to our success, and they should have been fresh. So I don't know if it's a plane ride or bright lights, but I can't buy it totally that both teams went through the same preparatory period, and our bench can't compensate for that. And man, the bright lights that we've had with Joe T and our bench, man, I was just shocked that our bench couldn't help us more.
Joe T, I thought, played with great energy. When he was in the game, he played with great energy. But see, he's just not an offensive guy. He's not going to create his own shot. He needs guys around him to be doing their thing. And you're right about the motion offense. I think at times in the second half, and I wouldn't necessarily blame the motion offense, but there were times where we were screaming at Keegan, not mad at Keegan, but just thinking he needs to go get the ball. Like, he's the best player in the country, potentially. He needs to get this ball. And he never really took charge until like the final 2 minutes. And at that point, it was do or die. And, there was no room for error. And it was too little too late, honestly. And, you have a couple bad calls and that seals the game. So I do believe that Fran, that's one thing that if I'm Fran, I'm probably looking this offseason. If there's any chance of Keegan coming back or not, I need to think, okay, Chris is basically a carbon copy of Keegan. I know he plays a bit differently, but even if it's not Keegan here next year, Chris is going to be the guy. How do we change things so that, and maybe he doesn't feel that he needs to do that, but I saw in that game yesterday, I think an inability to ride your best player when troubled times come, and they need to figure out how to get the ball to their best guy and let him go to work in isolation. And they just never did that once. And that is a bit concerning. I'm glad you brought that up. Luka Garza, he's a different player. For the most part, they could rely on him when they needed to bucket just to drop it down to him. But Keegan's a guy at the next level. He plays kind of like he is. He's going to be a small forward. I don't think he's a power forward at the NBA level. I think he plays like a small. And so he's going to have to be a guy who takes the ball out in the wing and makes a play at times. And certainly at this level, I'm not blaming Keegan Murray. I think it would have been wise a couple times in that second half. I felt like Fran could have used another timeout. I think he had like 3 timeouts late in the half. I don't know that he used a timeout in that second half until late. So timeouts are another thing I wish Fran would be a little bit more resourceful with. And I mean that be a little bit more liberal with your timeout spending. But again, I'm grasping at straws here, Lemansky, trying to figure out how to explain it. But I just don't understand how Iowa was so slow in the game. They just looked like they were lethargic. And maybe that was an emotional hangover. If it wasn't physical fatigue, then I just don't know what it was, because they did look slow. And I'm not the only one who commented that. I know Coach Gary Close said the same thing.
And I thought of what you just said and didn't mention earlier, that when you have that emotional high, I mean, I don't have any good analogies of it because I can't remember any great analogy in my below average sporting career. But when you have a high, that high, we're human beings and they're kids, and you tend to go compensate low. And that's true with a lot of things. And I think part of it is, I don't want to call it reading your press clippings. When you have that kind of emotional high, and then you play a team you know nothing about. And the second thing I think that has something to do with it. And the second thing I'll say is that this team has ridden the horse about, I have confidence, you shoot the ball. I think about Mulvey's 3-pointer, which I winced when Mulvey shot it, but Fran backed him kind of in postgame, even though he kind of winced at the bench, and you kind of love it. But, this is the NCAA tournament. And when you are playing, they're all good teams. I really would debate anybody about the ball in the hands of your greatest players. And there should have been, especially when you're on the ropes, in the second half, there should have been plays run for Keegan either outside on the 3-point line in the screen game or down low, or Chris Murray. We still don't know what Chris Murray was capable of because he got the shaft on a foul. And that was late in the game because he didn't have enough plays run for him. And those are our 2 best shooters. And somebody's probably got, I think Sanford's going to come out of his shell next year, and I'm going to look very carefully. He's got plays run for him in close games, because that guy, for a freshman, can handle the bright lights. But I'll let you respond.
Yeah, and Freedom Liberty, appreciate this super chat from Freedom Liberty. This kind of goes along with what we're talking about, Lemansky. He says, Iowa women won 8 games in 14 days to close the season, playing mostly 8 players. Tired is no excuse. That's true. Now, they did have, Freedom Liberty, they did have the extra week off. And I know you're not just bringing up this Illinois State game, but it does bring into question, once you hit March Madness, if there's more of a need for a longer break as opposed to the gap between the end of the regular season and the beginning of conference tournament play. I'm not saying it's an excuse. I'm just trying to figure out where the fatigue that seemed to be there on the court was coming from. But the Iowa women didn't even look rusty today. Like, they were off, 2 weeks almost, a week and a half, didn't even look rusty. So I appreciate this super chat from Freedom Liberty. But yeah, I don't have another explanation, Lemansky. I just, maybe in a couple of weeks, you'll be able to look back and figure out in hindsight what the problem was. But I will never know. It's just it's going to be one of those mysteries that goes down in the record books.
I guess the last thing I'll leave you with, and I don't have any strong opinion because I'm not smart enough to figure it out, but I have a friend that's he's a big Iowa State fan. He lives out west. He watches a lot of program NBA games. He's very knowledgeable, very intelligent. And he's been telling me all year he disagrees with playing a long bench. He thinks when you get into tournaments, you're better off to go with a shorter bench and 7 players. We don't do that. I don't know the right or wrong of it, but it's kind of interesting that the Iowa women, they got the 2 big horses. They ride those suckers, and it seems like the shorter bench for the Iowa women has worked all right. I don't have an opinion, but I'll hang up and listen to the show.
Thanks, Lemansky. Appreciate the call. And yeah, the depth off the bench. First of all, Iowa played. Let me count how many guys Iowa played yesterday. We didn't see Mulvey. We didn't see Agundale. We didn't see Ulis. So they won the Big Ten tournament by going deep, right? They won that Purdue game by going 12 deep. So if I'm counting right, they went 9 deep yesterday. Let me pull up the numbers. Have to be 9, right? Because Ulis didn't play, Ash didn't play, Mulvey didn't play, and Agundale didn't play. So and maybe Ulis should have played. I don't know what's going on there in Ulis. That's probably a discussion for a different day. I have no idea what's going on there because the dude was playing, I thought, well, basically all season, and all of a sudden we're not seeing him on the court. Now, this actually says that Ulis must have played less than a minute because he is listed on the participation chart. So that would be 10 guys, but he played less than a minute, according to this. Sandfort played 8 minutes. Perhaps he should have played more. And I'm sure Fran is, he's going to be the guy that thinks, I should have played so-and-so more. I don't think rotation had much to do with it, especially given the fact that Iowa won in the Big Ten tournament by playing such a deep group of guys. And, again, we're going to continue to try to figure out, grasp at straws. I keep using that term because there really isn't an explanation. I feel terrible for Jordan Bohannon. I feel terrible for Connor McCaffrey if he's leaving. I feel bad for him either way. Keegan Murray, if he leaves, that's not the way you want to leave. And that's why I think there's a small chance that he comes back. But it's very remote, but it is there. It is there. Freedom Liberty says Martin did not struggle today. She had 4 blocks early and a huge 3 late. No, I'm not saying she didn't make some plays, but given what kind of Big Ten tournament she had, I thought she struggled a bit today. Let me pull up her final numbers. And I get where you're coming from, Freedom Liberty, but her stat line for the day today. Kate Martin had 5 points, just 2 of 4 from the field. So, didn't really take a lot, didn't really need to. This team, that's the good news about this team, is with Warnock healthy now, they've got some options for that third scorer, whether that be Gabby Marshall, Kate Martin, or McKenna Warnock. They've, and then again, Taiwo sometimes comes in there and makes some plays, and she really wasn't offensively where she needed to be a year or two ago, and she's playing a lot better on that end now. So, I think there will be games. I understand where you're coming from here. I think there will be games where Kate Martin takes more shots and makes more shots. But I guess you're right. 2 of 4 from the field isn't a bad day. And again, 7 boards, which is really what they have her in there for, just to kind of be that scrappy, dirty play. And that's why I've compared her to Kathleen Doyle. Doyle was more of an offensive threat. Maybe Martin becomes that next year. Although with Caitlin there, it's harder for her offensive game, and I think she's got some of the same characteristics of a Kathleen Doyle with her ball handling skills and aggressive mentality. We'll see if that translates into more offense moving forward. Hawkeye Howard, appreciate you being here, buddy. He says, Great work this year. Looking forward to football season. I'm looking forward to it as well. We got spring football to talk about every Tuesday with Mark Rogers over at the other channel. Tipsy McStagger says the wrestling tourney has been really emotional as well. Lots of feelings come out of my eyes recently, and Skylar brings up the Marinelli loss. I think this season, I'm not saying that, again, I have not been following wrestling nearly as much as I know many of you who are big wrestling fans have been. I'll just admit that at the outset. First of all, because of how much is involved in running this show for Iowa women's basketball and Iowa men's basketball. But I think the Spencer Lee, to sum things up, I think it's safe to say the Spencer Lee injury, Iowa never really recovered from that. And I think Iowa competed in one of its best duels of the year against Penn State and lost. But that's the difference Spencer Lee makes. I think he competes in that duel. They probably win. But still some unbelievable wrestler. And you're going to lose a couple of guys. That's just Michael Kimmer's been here 7 years. Everybody makes fun of Bohannon, and Kimmer's going to be gone. So, been able to enjoy them for a long time. But some of these guys who have been the face of Iowa men's basketball, Iowa wrestling, will not be here next year. And that's the bittersweet part of March. The Hawkeye 128 takes 4 years to build a program from 2 conference wins and bottom of the barrel. And thank you for this super chat, Hawkeye Howard. I know I had it on the screen earlier. Thank you for the super chat donation. He says, hey, spring football is coming. It absolutely is next week. So there are good things happening, at least interesting things happening. And Freedom Liberty, thank you for this super chat as well. The super chat donation. And Freedom Liberty says Martin had 5.7 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 blocks today. Did not struggle at all. I validate what you just said. I know I ran through the stats a second ago, but she'll have better offensive days, but she just didn't need to be nearly as productive as she was in the Big Ten tournament. Kelly, good to see you here. Kelly says she was at the game and now stuck in traffic, so please be safe in listening to this show. Please drive safe home. Hawkeye 128 talks about the raveling recruits, and that is the counter argument to Tom Davis's success. And that's why I think Fran has basically built the program back to what Coach Davis did. And I love Dr. Tom. I wasn't alive during the majority of Dr. Tom's era, but just everything that I know from Gary Close and from talking to former players and from watching Iowa games from back in the 80s and 90s, he was just an unbelievable person to have as a part of this program, very much similar to Kirk Ferentz and what he's done for Iowa football. Whether you want to knock Kirk for not winning more Big Ten titles, I get that argument. I'm not saying I don't support that argument even, but as a person, they have been successful, not abundantly successful as far as postseason results and championships, but they have brought a lot of high character to the Iowa athletic department. Darrell Hayden says, I'm not saying Fran needs to be fired. We have to have a serious conversation about the fact that it's been 12 years since Lick, and our fear of going back to the Lick years needs to be addressed. Let me address that in a second. Let's get to our caller here. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
It's Hawkeye Howard.
Hawkeye Howard. How are you, sir?
I'm all right. I just thought I'd call you before I head off to work. I wanted to say, you know what? It's been a great year for basketball. Look what they accomplished. We can sit here and pick it apart with this one less game, but I have to say is they're human, and they played a lot of games in those within a couple of weeks, and like you said, they looked flat, and I just say what, they're human, and plus everybody had them going to the Final Four and doing this. I was like, my father always said, don't get your cart before the horse. It's one game at a time, and guess what? That one game bit them in where. So
and I think you're right. I think that's a great point, that these kids are human. And I remember asking Frank Henderson, Tony Perkins' uncle, on Tuesday about this. I remember asking Kenyon Murray and Chris Kingsbury and Coach Close about this on Wednesday night. And I asked a simple question: could the hype be too much for this team? Could it get to their heads? And I'm not implying that it did, but if there was even some unconscious, I don't even know how to describe it, but sort of a letdown because of some of the hype, and the hype was real. You brought it out. the fact that we
Yeah.
had Clark Kellogg and Dick Vitale and Andy Katz and all these people for ESPN and these big names, Reese Davis saying that Iowa was a Final Four team. As a human being, that's going to affect you, whether you're a senior or not. These are 22, 23-year-old kids. Maybe Jordan Bohannon's 26 or 24 now, but these are still young adults, Howard, and I think you're absolutely right on that. It's not an insult to them. I think any team, I think every team, it's how you deal with it. It's not that you just dismiss it, because it's almost impossible to just dismiss it, but it's how you deal with it. And I think you got to give Richmond the credit. They seem to use that potentially as motivation, and I don't think Iowa – it doesn't seem that Iowa was able to harness that and use it as motivation. Not saying that it was a detriment, but they certainly weren't able to build behind that and use it as further motivation, if that makes sense.
It's I mean, they're young students, and they got that invincible, I'm invincible kind of attitude right now, and they got to learn to pace themselves. An old coach told me, you got to learn to pace yourself. Yeah, they probably have, but to me, they just seemed like they were just really flat, like you kept saying. And as soon as I saw that, I go, yep, they didn't pace themselves. So, and it happened what happened. Now, that being said, it was a great year. Fran really built something here. He's got a model. He knows what he's got to do the next time. Let's hope he can duplicate this going forward.
I just and address, I know, Howard, you've been here since like the beginning of this channel. The real Hayden has been here forever, but I'm just going to disagree with Hayden for a second here, because to say that, or we're fearful of going back to the Lick years. Hayden, Fran's making the tournament every year. Lick never licked the tournament. Excuse me. He never sniffed. He never sniffed the tournament. Sorry, my pun there was pretty distasteful. He never sniffed the tournament. So to say that we're fearful of going back to the tournament or going back to the Lick era, I don't have a fear of going back to the Lick era. Are you kidding me? With the development that's happening right now, the fact that they just won 4 games in 4 days and won the Big Ten title, and now you have a right to your opinion, Hayden. And I love you and appreciate you being on here, but I don't agree with that at all. And yes, I agree with this notion right here that we shouldn't be making decisions because of fear. And I feel like at times football has done that. I've been very outspoken about that. Hawkeye Howard, you know that. I've been outspoken about decision making and not wanting to take chances because we're afraid of failing. But I don't think that's where basketball is. I don't think that's how Fran operates. And even though I think the athletic department administration has at times failed in making decisions that are best for the fan base and best for the program, I don't believe anything should be even discussed right now with Fran McCaffrey, because he just won a Big Ten title for the first time in 16 years.
Yeah, I think he's doing fine. He's got the mold to do, to go forward. He knows what it takes to get there, and he's got that taste. And I think you'll be seeing more going forward, and Big Ten championships and Big Ten tournament championships. Now, changing about your channel. What a year that you've had with your channel. Look all the guests you had. I applaud you this basketball season. Had all the old players and everything you had coming on the channel with the coaches. I thought it was great.
Well, I appreciate.
I really thought it was great.
Yeah, and I'm genuine when I say that I appreciate that. I appreciate hearing those compliments because, first of all, I give a lot of the credit for a lot of these guest appearances to Coach Close. He's been amazing at helping these things happen. But I've had a blast doing it, and it's been tiresome. I just was talking to a friend of mine today. I'm tired, even though Iowa just lost in the first round. I mean, I would have powered through these 4 days, because Iowa men would have played. They played Thursday. We would have had a postgame show today for the women, postgame show tomorrow for the men, and a postgame show Sunday for the women. But I would have powered through it. But it's tiresome. So I do appreciate hearing that, Howard, that you've appreciated the work we put in.
And let's the women now. Let's right on the women's coattails, and we'll see how far the women can do. I mean, they've been doing great. You just look at all the football. We're West champions. Basketball, we're Big Ten champions and tournament champions, and the women are Big Ten champions in the track. It's great to be a Hawkeye this year. Come on.
I agree. Now, here's the deal, Howard. I said it last night. The basketball team, the football team were in very similar positions in the end because both teams failed to get over the hump. There were significant accomplishments made by both teams, but the Iowa football team wins the West. Fans are celebrating, rightfully so, but then you get pounded in the Big Ten championship game. The Iowa men's basketball team wins the Big Ten tournament and then loses in the first round of March Madness. That is a problem. Can we agree on that? That's a problem. Even though we celebrate the accomplishments, that's a problem.
Fran he's had a problem with the first round tournaments, but I believe I'm going to say this. I'm going to put myself out there on that limb, and I believe Fran will figure it out and get past the first round going forward. I really believe that. And as far as football, we won't go there until August.
We got plenty of time to go there the next 5 months.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I'll get off the horn, and I won't talk as long as some people. Well, in a way, but you have a great evening, and I will keep listening and stuff. Probably won't hear from me for a little while because I'm headed down to Little Rock.
Okay.
Do some work down there for the next 4 weeks. So.
Well, okay. Well, safe travels, sir, and we'll talk to you when you get back.
Okay. Thank you.
Take care, man. Appreciate that from Hawkeye Howard, and want to extend appreciation. DC Hawk with the super. I'm going to call it a super chat. I think it's a super chat. Super thanks. I need to be able to identify these. DC Hawk, thank you so much for this. Very much appreciated, and very much appreciate your support throughout the year and for being here and helping to support the channel as you can, as you are able to financially. So thank you for that. And yeah, I agree with everything that Hawkeye Howard just had to say. I do think that right now there's still a major hump for both of these programs, whether we're talking football or men's basketball, to get over. The good news is the women have much surpassed that hump. Lisa Bluter right now, the next hump for Lisa, as I said earlier in the show, is finding a way to get to the Final Four. And that's a huge accomplishment if you can do it. They're in a position this year where if you can get fortunate, I mean, they got to get really fortunate because they're a 2 seed, but they're a 2 seed in the wrong region. Okay. They're a 2 seed in the South Carolina region. So it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard if you can get past Iowa State. I think the draw is actually pretty favorable. Iowa's familiar with Iowa State. I have a hard time seeing Iowa State beating Iowa again. I know Iowa State's loaded. Ashley Jones is spectacular. I just feel like once we get to Greensboro and Iowa, they just blew out Illinois State. I think you'll get a win against Creighton. Now the Iowa State women will have 2 wins under their belt as well. But I see Iowa winning that game and moving on against South Carolina. I just don't know who's going to beat the Gamecocks prior to the Iowa game. But I guess time will tell. I'm not going to dismiss it. But again, thank you, DC Hawk, for that. Much appreciated. Tim Van Scheppen, which players leave on transfer? That's a great question. I'm assuming you're talking the men. Again, I apologize to the women's basketball fans who are on here. I try to let the fans take this show where they please. I've tried to relate everything back to the women. But if we're talking about men's hoops, Tim, I don't want to really speculate on that. I know people have speculated on Joe Toussaint possibly leaving. I've speculated, is Josh Agundale going to stay? Is his development, is it coming along enough? He hasn't played. He's been here 2 years. He hasn't really played significant minutes ever. What's going on with Tyler Ulis? You got Desante Bowen coming in next year. The big story is at point guard, because with Bowen coming in and you lose Bohannon, will Ulis and Toussaint both stick it out? That's the question. I sure hope so. Toussaint's such a team first guy. Aaron Ulis has great connections to the program with his brother's recruitment and coming here and playing early as a freshman, but he just faded late as far as playing time is concerned. So a great question, Tim. If Connor McCaffrey decides to come back, by the way, and I had somebody ask me this earlier today on Twitter, if Connor McCaffrey comes back, they don't have any scholarships available because they got Josh Dix coming in and they've got Desante Bowen coming in. They have no scholarships available. So if Connor comes back, could he come back as a walk-on? I suppose. Would Fran do that? I don't know. Perhaps. I know Aiden Shaw's available, a kid that Iowa recruiter that had committed to Mizzou. Obviously, they'd love to go. I think they'd love to go get a transfer 3-point shooter. I think they could really use one with Bohannon leaving. I don't know if Josh Dix is going to be healthy to play right away and be a factor. And then you're hoping that one of those big guys develop. Now, if one of those big guys leave, then you can go out and get a big man in the transfer portal potentially. But that's assuming you can find one and assuming they want to come here. I don't know why you wouldn't want to come here as a big man, given what Luka Garza did just a couple of years ago and what Tyler Cook did prior, etc. But great question, Tim. Maybe one of the biggest storylines now for the immediate future. Do these guys stick it out? And if not, how does Iowa respond via the transfer portal? All right. Tipsy, is Euless underperforming at practice? Again, I have no idea. I know I'm skipping by missing your comment. I'm trying to get to the end here because we just hit an hour, and I know I got another call here waiting, so I want to get to that call here in a second, but I want to make sure that I'm not missing a couple of the comments that I had marked. DC Hawk says the ESPN article, Why Iowa and Kentucky Lost, was very insightful, especially in the last line of the Iowa part of the article. Same comment could apply to the Iowa football team. And I will check that out, DC Hawk. I have not seen that. I did see that article advertised, I believe, when I opened up the ESPN app. Tim says there is a great big man at Iowa State we could use. Are we talking about Xavier Foster? There's a lot of baggage there, Tim. I know he was he's not being charged by the Ames Police Department, and I know this. I mean, first of all, it was big news, but I have a bit more information on that investigation because I operate a news site here in Story County. So this was a local news. This was a local news item here for quite some time, and that ongoing investigation, and there just wasn't enough evidence to press charges against Xavier Foster. So he is available, but I sure don't think Fran's probably interested in taking him on. But I guess you never know. But I would think there's a lot of other options. You don't want to bring a guy like that in there who could potentially cause problems with a roster and a group that's very close knit. That's what I'd say. But again, never say never on using the portal to go get a big man. I think they could use it. Thank you for calling from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
Hey, this is the Iowa Hawkeye. Hey. I wanted to talk a little bit about what you were saying about who's coming in next year and who would stay and whether Keegan would stay. I think Frank goes through every year with the kids. He gives them a talk and say, "This is where I see you at on the team and what you can do for us, and what role you can play." And it very may well be that someone like Euless or Toussaint, with this new kid coming in, it's a good point guard. He may say, "Hey, this will be your role on the team. If you can do better, then, I give you the job and you do better, then, the opportunity is there for you." So I think that really goes on every year. And I think we see that, with kids that leave this program. But as far as, we're talking about Davis and McCaffrey, they're really sort of in the same position. McCaffrey's really sort of in the same position Davis was. He built the program up to where they were making the tournament every year, pretty much making the tournament every year. And,
yes,
he did have a big boost out of, Greg Stokes and Michael Payne and those Raveling kids and BJ Armstrong. But really, it was sort of the same conversation. And we're talking about, is Iowa going to transition into a school like, the top perennial top 5, 10 schools in the country that win the national championships. And part of the reason they win the national championships is because they are able to recruit from the top of that list. When you played for Tom Davis and you played for Fran McCaffrey, and part of the reason they run these, deep offenses is because kids get to come here and learn how to play basketball, and they're going to get a chance to play. And when you run a 7-man team and you play, slow half-court basketball, you can win more, but you're not going to get the same kind of recruits. A school like if you just look at the McDonald's All-Americans, they all go to Kentucky, North Carolina, Kansas, Duke, and that's not who we get. That's not who Tom Davis got after, the Raveling recruit. So you're talking about how do you transition into that kind of program? You look at someone like Kentucky, they recruit 5 freshmen, they win the national championship, 5 new freshmen, and that's a tall order, right? You're talking about going from a perennial show in the dance to actually making damage in the dance. And I just don't think that's a really, really hard thing to do given our market and what these other schools can do. If you want to win a national championship and go to the NBA, you have that capability as a player, you're going to go to Duke or Kansas, and the thing that's been great about McCaffrey is he's been able to keep our best players home, and we haven't been doing that. And, I've been watching since Olsen. So, once he had that ability to transition the program into a national powerhouse, he went to where he could recruit and get the kind of help from the university that he could there. He was a fantastic coach, Anyway, your thoughts?
Yeah, let me interject there because you bring up keeping the big recruits home. I'm assuming you're talking Marcus Page, Harrison Barnes, Omaha Billieu. Are those the guys you're referring to? Taman Lipsey?
Yeah, those kind of kids. Yeah, those definitely got away from us,
Yeah, I think it is hard it's going to forever be hard for Iowa to compete with the likes of North Carolina for a guy like Harrison Barnes. I think Omaha Billieu will probably end up at Kansas or probably Kansas. I don't know. I mean, I have no inside information on Kansas, but it is going to be hard. Now, I will say this. We have to acknowledge the fact that Keegan Murray is a 5-star recruit. Whether we want to acknowledge that or not, he is. Can we agree on that?
Out of high school, he wasn't, for sure.
Well, but I don't care. But does it really matter what the recruiting? Who cares what the recruiting rankings say? He's the best player in the country potentially. He's a 5-star guy, right?
Oh, you mean coming out of college for sure? Yeah, I mean, but not out of high school.
Well, but
I mean, no one was looking at those guys, either one of the brothers.
But I'm saying he's only been here 1 year, so it's not like he was a 5-year product and now he's just now getting to the point of being an All-American. He's been here. This is his 2nd year here, and he's playing like the best player in the country. You see what I'm saying? I mean, yeah, there are guys who are going to come from high school to the college level and play like 5-star guys who are ready for the NBA. Yeah, and it took Keegan an extra year. But, I mean, like, okay, he was a 0-star recruit or whatever he was, 3-star recruit coming out of high school or coming out of DME Academy. But you've got to give Fran credit for what he may lack, and some of that's not his fault, being able to grab those big guys like Billieu or whoever. He has been making up for it, similar to how Kirk Ferentz has over his history, making up for it by identifying guys who in a year, 2, 3, and with Garza, even towards his 4th year, have become the best players in the country or close to that. I mean, most programs can't boast that. So I think that has to be considered. But you're right. In Kentucky,
I mean, I totally agree with that. Absolutely. I mean, that's why kids come here. That's, they know they're going to get to learn how to play. And these other schools, they don't have the kind of, you look at Iowa football and Iowa basketball, back when I played basketball, I mean, it extended all the way down into the high school. We knew every play that the Hawkeyes ran. We ran every single inbounds play, every offense, every defense. And that's because of that. And same with football, that extension that the program does down into the state level, and so we're able to we have a good base in Iowa for football and basketball. And, but these other schools aren't doing that. They don't, Kentucky does not have to, or Duke does not have to extend itself as a program to get the kind of recruits that they get. They don't. Iowa does. Iowa has to, generate opportunities for kids in our own state and take advantage of it.
So
and sometimes that means.
How do they do that?
What do you mean? How do they do?
I mean,
how do they take advantage of?
How do they keep Omaha, Bill U home? Because like you and I both know, Fran has not been afraid, as opposed to, and I'm not saying that Kirk Ferentz recruits afraid, but I'm saying Kirk has oftentimes, and we heard it even in regards to the transfer portal earlier this year. We heard, was it Tyler Barnes or Kirk Ferentz himself, who basically said that we don't really target the big names because we don't want to waste our time. He's basically said that. Fran has not had that mono.
I don't disagree with that. What I'm saying is that a player like Harrison Barnes is going to go, hey, I'm going to Duke because they won the national championship and I'm going to get a chance to win one.
Right.
You know, and that's just, and that's what I'm saying. You know, we're talking about Iowa, you know, essentially kind of trying to do what Wisconsin has done, which, you know, has a lot of Iowa alum in its coaching staff and through its program.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you do that? You know, and that's what I'm just saying. It's like you can't compete with these markets and these schools that can just pick from the top. They do, and you know, and that's why they get the recruits. And so to transfer yourself and say, oh, we're gonna become a Kansas where we have a chance to win the national championship, you know, once every 4 or 5 years. There are very few schools that can do that. And part of the reason they can do it is because they have done it, you know, and kids are going to go, well, this is my best opportunity to win a national championship. The kids that are going to Iowa are saying, I'm going here because I get a chance to play basketball or football, and I have a good chance of learning how to play at the level where I can transfer to the professional game. And Fran has done that very well. And I would say, again, minus the rattling recruits, better than Tom Davis, you know?
Yeah.
So I just think, you know, you know, I mean, I was there. I watched every Tom Davis game. So I feel, you know, I felt like people are feeling about Fran right now in terms of, well, how come we can't do this extra thing, you know, to have this big finish? And, you know, in my sports career, you know, I was a tennis pro for a lot of years, and I know, like, winning championships, winning tournaments, you really, to get through those kinds of environments and come out on the top, it's very rarely that, you know, you're a Cinderella team and you go all the way. What you usually have is, I'm pretty darn good, and if I get through the second week and I'm in the semis or the quarters, I'm pretty hard to beat, and I've done it before, you know. The road there isn't as hard along the way. You know, you look at a team like Gonzaga is a great example. How hard are they working to win every game this year, right? They're not working that hard in compared to teams that are working in the Big Ten. But having said that, when it gets to that time of the year, they've got the legs to do it, you know. They've got the confidence to do it. And that's, to me, that just learning how to make that transition. I mean, I don't think you could find another coach in the country that's going to come to Iowa and take a team that's won one game in the Big Ten, 12 years ago. And that was one of my favorite teams, the first team he had with Jared Cole and May and Matt Gatens. It was unbelievable. Loved it. Great team. Anyway, that's just a really, really tall order. Half the teams lose, you know, in one day. And just to make one last point about how we play these kinds of games, you know, these one and done games, I think Close made a really good point about that. You know, my experience with one and done is you got to go in there swinging, you know, don't hold anything back, because it's not, it's not the worst you play. It's that you play well. I think the team got out there. They didn't want to make mistakes. You know, everybody wanted to do the right thing, you know, and you alluded to this point too. I mean, you got to get Keegan the ball, and he's got to get his 25, and he's going to carry that team, and they got to go out there and say, we're just going to drop on these guys, and if we lose, we lose. We win, we win. But you're not going to be able to play tentative basketball.
To put some level of responsibility on Keegan, I think he also has a level of responsibility. If he's a lottery pick, to go get the ball. I want to make that clear.
Absolutely.
I'm not trying to put the majority of the blame on him. I'm not putting any blame on him, but
it's not
not
blame
only
at all.
should it
Absolutely not.
be a concerted effort to get him the ball, he's got to go get the ball.
Yeah, and just say I'm taking over.
Right.
This is my team, and if we're gonna lose, it's gonna be because of me. If we're gonna win, it's gonna be because of me.
Right.
And so tennis is the same way. You can't, since there isn't tomorrow, since you're gonna be back on that plane if you lose, then you got to just say I'm just gonna go out there and swing, and that's it. If I can knock the guy out, I'm knocking him out. And if it's not my day, it's not my day. But you can't go home any other way.
I want
and
you to.
There's no doubt about these kids' effort. It's not that. It has nothing to do with that. But I also know about legs, and a lot of matches I lost because of legs, not because the guy was better than me. And in this particular instance, they had they had the same schedule too. But we also run this high run gun offense. So we're not going to be able to. We couldn't get transition on them if we tried the other night. So you can be better than another team, and plus that kind of offense they run. 3 days to figure that out. It's not like a team that we played before. So I'm not making excuses for them, but it was. I've always been unhappy with the Big Ten tournament because I think of this extra wear it puts on the kids going into the NCAAs. And I wish, maybe if you had a double bye, that would be enough time to prepare and be on a really even footing.
Let me just make three quick points with you before I let you go. One thing, and I know you're not implying this, but I think the other part of the Big Ten tournament that maybe we're overlooking is, yes, Iowa played 4 games in 4 days, had a first-round exit, but Fran has struggled to win in the tournament throughout his career here, and they've never done anything in the Big Ten tournament. So fatigue has never been an issue before. So there's something else that was an issue in the past. And so I don't.
Well, no, I think it is, and I think it has something to do with the way Fran coaches. I think you're absolutely right. Traditionally, he's been really prepared all year long. He overmeets expectations, and by the end of the season, if you look at that team with Aaron White on it, they're 10 in the country, and they're dead. They're tired. He's wore them down, and he's worked them. I think he's much better now. What he did with defense this year compared to the other years he's had. I don't know. I don't know. My opinion is that this Taylor fella is just really changed. Their on-ball defense is so much better. They were getting dropped threes just nonstop in years before. But what you were saying too, in the past, I've always felt like, yeah, they have a pretty good season, but by the end of the season, they're beat. And I don't know if it's, what his schedule is or, how intense, but they just seem to be worn out by the end of that and going into the Big Ten tournament. Because particularly that team with Aaron White that did well, and they were 10 in the country, and it was like, hey, this is a good opportunity. It looks like they can do it. And they were flat and they just seemed tired. So, it's a long season. I just don't think the Big Ten tournament helps. I almost would rather have, I'd rather play every team twice in the Big Ten and not have the Big Ten tournament. That's me, because I think it's unfair to, crown a league champion and then not have it actually played every team home and away. I would find that a much more valuable kind of preparation and indicator of who's the best team in the Big Ten. So, but anyway, I really appreciate you talking to me. And
thanks for the call, man. Great call. Appreciate you taking the time to dial in.
No problem. Loved it. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night. Yeah. And I would echo that. That was a great point. At the end. Yeah, that's a valid argument. Why not just play every team home and away, every team in the Big Ten, and just crown one champion? Why do you need a Big Ten tournament? I've always liked the Big Ten tournament, but there's some flaws in it. The other thing, he alluded to it earlier, and I just want to bring that up before we end this show, and a couple comments. I went way over my time this evening, so apologize to everybody that, well, people are on here still, but I guess it's not an inconvenience to all of you. But the idea of Fran being able to get the big guns that can consistently, I'm not saying this is going to turn into Duke or North Carolina or Kentucky, but I do think that Fran has an opportunity to really benefit from these last 3 years, having the player of the year in Luka Garza, basically 2 straight years. I know he wasn't consensus the first year, But having the National Player of the Year, now having a guy who's not only potentially going to be a National Player of the Year, but also going to be a potential lottery pick if he leaves, if he comes back, he's going to be another potential Player of the Year next year. But that can really benefit recruiting, especially now, because that's one thing Fran has not done as it relates to development. He has not consistently developed guys for the NBA. Jared Utoff was great in college, has not made it in the NBA. Dev Marble was great in college, has not made it in the NBA. Aaron White was great in college, has not made it, never even played a second in the NBA. Tyler Cook, he's been in and out. Right now, I think he's on the Bulls roster. Wieskamp Garza have an opportunity to make their mark on the NBA, and certainly Keegan does. But if those guys, especially Keegan Murray, can make their mark in the league, that will help recruiting immensely. They got a national stage in winning the Big Ten tournament. You wish they could have won some in March. But I think recruiting-wise, I think Fran has done good things here these last couple of years to a point where he can get a bit of a recruiting bump, right? A bump up, if you will. We'll see if it translates, but I do think that's a factor. That is a real possibility. Thomas says, who's coming back for Iowa men's basketball next season? We don't know what's going to happen with the transfer portal. I hope Connor McCaffrey comes back. If that's the case, then we don't know, will somebody else leave and open up a scholarship for a transfer portal candidate or a late 22 grab? That's a possibility. But as of right now, we just don't know. And Ben, yes, we've talked about this, potentially reconsidering the setup of the Big Ten tournament, which probably isn't going to happen because it's been like this for years. But again, I understand that line of reasoning given what just happened. But again, Iowa's struggled. They've struggled to win in the tournament. I'm talking about March Madness after losing early in the Big Ten tournament. So I don't think you can say there's a cause and effect there, but it is something that I think should be considered for multiple reasons. And yes, Rebraca should be coming back next year. He has stated that he should be coming back next year. So we'll see if that happens. All right, folks, as Freedom Liberty brings out Sellout Carver Sunday, I'll be back with you Sunday for Iowa postgame following Iowa Creighton. A reminder that game will be announced as far as a time and TV, ESPN Family and Network game, but it is a second-round game between the Blue Jays and the Hawkeyes Sunday. Appreciate everybody being here. This podcast will be available via podcast. This postgame, I should say, will be available via podcast from the Hawkeye of the Storm, Spotify, Anchor, Google, wherever you listen to your podcast. Appreciate you being here this afternoon. Great chat. I'm sorry we kind of segued into Iowa men, but I try to let the fans carry the conversation as much as possible. So we'll talk to you Sunday. Appreciate you hanging out, and go Hawks versus the Blue Jays.